Hello, fellow Yellow Jackets. It's Caitlin here from the Jacket Journal, here to give you a quick intro before this video starts. I had the opportunity to film an interview with Joe Zieja, who is the voice actor for many different characters, but most notably for us, he voice acts for Claude Von Regan from Fire Emblem Three Houses. That's the next review I plan to release, so I thought it'd be nice to go ahead and give this to you guys ahead of time. The Three Houses video will be out in about 2 or 3 weeks from now, and you'll see another reminder at the end of this video. But until then, I hope you enjoy the interview because he had a lot of really great stuff to say. I'll see you guys later. Bye! Hello, fellow Yellow Jackets. This is Caitlin with a special interview for the Jacket Journal. Today I have with me a special guest, if he'd like to introduce himself.
Hey guys, my name is Joe Zieja. I'm a voice actor and an author out here in Los Angeles.
Okay, so thanks again for agreeing to do this with me. I reached out to you because this is actually going to be part of a series for Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Great.
But before we get into a lot of that, I figured it might be nice to get to know a little bit more about you. So first of all, I have to know, you wore a lot of yellow during your Three Houses videos on YouTube, but what's your actual favorite color?
I'm a big fan of blue, like a nice deep blue, to be honest. Don't tell Chris Hackney that. Don't tell him.
I'm sure I can keep that secret. So before I started the interview, I wanted to do a little bit of research, so I wasn't completely clueless.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out that you like scuba diving, you like parkour, and you like flying airplanes. How do you get such a diverse cast of hobbies?
You know, I've always kind of collected skills my whole life. If something is interesting to me, I just kind of go and I throw myself into it for a little while. A lot of times, as with scuba diving and flying airplanes, I get certified. I do it a couple times, and usually I back off, and then I'll come back to it every once in a while. So yeah, it's just I like collecting skills, experiencing new things, and yeah, that's just kind of what I like to do.
Okay, cool. So you left Jersey to be a part of the Air Force, and then you left that to become a government contractor. Then you picked up writing and voice acting, and if I'm not mistaken, you also do music. So what do you think is one of your favorite tracks that you've produced?
Favorite tracks of music? Oh gosh. So if you're not familiar with Overclocked Remix is like this community of Uber nerds that remixes video game music. So I've done a bunch of stuff for them. I'm on a bunch of different albums. I'd have to say my favorite track I ever produced is one that hasn't come out yet. It's like a 80s rock ballad that I wrote, arranged the end theme of Lufia 2, and it was something that me and my wife did together. But it hasn't come out yet. That's probably my favorite track I've ever done.
Okay, cool. I'll have to keep an eye out for that then.
Yeah.
Do you wish, I heard that you actually sometimes you can incorporate your music into the projects you take on. How often do you get to do that? Like, do you wish you could do it more? Or are you happy to kind of keep it as a semi-hobby that you just work with on the side?
You know, I think I'm pretty happy to keep it as a hobby. I do it every once in a while. I'll have a client crossover from the commercial or corporate world that needs music as well. Typically, you know, corporate and commercial music isn't exactly the most creatively fulfilling thing to do. So it's just sort of like an added service I'll provide my clients. I'd much rather be a hobbyist, do it myself, play what I want, write what I want.
Oh yeah, I could definitely understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing that you don't really want to limit, otherwise it just never comes sounding right.
Right.
Okay, cool. So slowly starting to kind of shift gears a little bit. I noticed that on your YouTube channel, you basically have a little almost how-to introductory series for people who are trying to start voice acting themselves. What kind of inspired you to do that? Because I don't see too many people doing that.
Honestly, it was all the emails and questions I get from people and tweets that are like, hey, how do I get started? How do I get started? How do I get started? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to make a video series where I'm going to dive into a bunch of different topics. And usually, like, I'll throw people D. Bradley Baker's website, iwanttobeavoiceactor.com. And then I'll throw them Tara Platt and Yuri Lowenthal's book, which is called, I can't remember. It might just be called Voice Acting or something like that. But it's the only book they've written, and there's not very many books on voice acting. So
okay, yeah. That's really cool because I think just looking around, it definitely doesn't seem like it would be the easiest thing to break into.
Yeah, it's a strange career field. I kind of stumbled into it.
Mhm.
But a lot of people will try for many, many, many years and never get any traction. So yeah, it's weird. It's Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, then, what initially gave you the idea to voice act? Because, like you said, you kind of just stumbled into it. You kind of got what's basically a lucky break through a friend, right?
Hmm.
But I kind of wondered what kind of led you to taking an interest in that in the first place.
Well, I've always been a gamer, and I've always been a consumer of video games and anime and cartoons. And really, it was like this thing in the back of my head where I was like, I've always wanted to try it. I don't
Hmm.
really know how to try it, but I've always wanted to try it. And that's kind of what precipitated the conversation. And then that got trying video games and animation got kind of turned into like, well, you can do that for the corporate world and commercial world. And then it was
Hmm.
like, well, now I've quit my job. What do I do? Okay, I'll move to LA to hunt the video games and the cartoons and the anime. And that's kind of how it shook
Okay.
out.
So it was kind of almost more of a passion project.
Yeah, not even so much a passion project. It was like, you know what, I'd like to try voice acting. And then here I
Mhm.
am.
Okay, cool. Well, then, I wonder something I've always wondered is me myself, I tend to write every now and then. And
Mhm.
so every now and then I'll have just a little piece that I'll bash out within a week and I'll be, yeah, cool, short story, whatever. A lot of times people say, when you write, you kind of leave yourself with a part of whatever character you've made, that you kind of influence them. So I wonder then if it would be the opposite with voice acting. I wonder if you would take your characters with you. And I wanted to ask that because I imagine you would kind of have to, considering you're becoming them whenever you act for them, if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting perspective that I hadn't considered before. That when you're outputting and writing, you're giving yourself to a character, and in many cases for voice acting, there's a lot of input. I'll say that's generally true. It's even more true when I get a chance to observe other voice actors doing their job, which actually isn't very often in the
Hmm.
industry. I'm in a show called Lego City Adventures right now,
Okay.
on Nickelodeon. It's just a new Lego show,
Hmm.
and I get the privilege of being in a room with some of the best actors in animation, and I'll just sit there for 4 hours and absorb. And I definitely take those pieces of characters with me as
Hmm.
well.
Okay, that's really cool. Because it was just something I thought about, because I had seen, like, the aspect of it throwing online. I was like, if you're becoming a person day in and day out, how could you not learn to almost be the person?
Sure, there are a lot of people like the old guard animation guys who would do cartoons all day and every day. I can't remember which pair of it, but there was two of them that basically every day would go out for a drink after work just to remember who the heck they were.
Wow, that's almost really bizarre.
Mm.
So, like you said, you're in a series right now, and you've been in multiple animated projects, like the Hunter x Hunter movie and the Star Fox Zero, like animated short. Can you say you have a preference for acting in like either animation or video games, or do you really have a preference for what you're acting in?
It kind of goes project to project. I've been in cartoons that were not as exciting. I've been in video games that weren't as exciting, but I mean, the Lego show is probably the most fun I have in voiceover, just because we laugh in a room for 4 hours, all at each other. When I was in Just Cause 4, it was
Mhm.
full motion capture. So, you put on the Lycra suit with the
Yeah.
light bulb looking things on it and run around. And that is more like stage acting. You really get into it. And, you get to hang out with all the people that you're in the game with, which again, doesn't happen very often. We're almost always recording solo. So it really kind of depends on the project. But I would say like if I could narrow it down to anything, it would definitely be games and animation for
Right.
sure.
That actually kind of took me into another question. You said a lot of the time you're doing it solo. From what I've heard and seen, voice acting seems to be like a fairly independent thing, at least when it comes to the actual recording. So, how would you say that's unique compared to your typical like office 9 to 5?
How would I say that it's well? I like it because it always changes. The typical office 9 to 5, like you're in the same room with the same people every day for the exact
Hmm.
same hours. Voice acting, I do probably 60 to 70% of my work from my home studio right here.
Hmm.
Um, that usually doesn't include games and animation. And then when I get to do those things, I'm going out and meeting different people and going to different. So it's really neat getting to know so many people with such a diverse set of skills. It's a lot more open and fluid than a corporate environment for sure.
Hey, that's really cool. It also seems like a lot of recording sessions might be held solo, where it's like just you in a room, and then it's whoever on the corporate business side giving directions.
Yep.
Does that bother you at all? Because it seems like it would be easier to kind of play off of other people.
It is, and that's why the bigger budget stuff, you have everybody in a room, because almost invariably you will produce a better performance when you have other humans. I mean, acting is an inherently human act, so doing it in a vacuum, so to speak, can be very challenging to produce a realistic performance. And I think it shows in a lot of games. I mean, you just look at the evolution of voice acting over the last 20 years.
Oh yeah.
It sounds a lot different now than it did then, and it's all about trying to figure out how to provide actors with context for their characters when there's nobody else in the room, and developing that art of you've got to act. You basically have to play pretend all the time. You have no set. You have no other people. So that's the art that's developed over the last 20 years.
Okay. So about how far ahead would you say you're typically casted for a project? Like, does it just vary depending, or?
Yeah, it really depends. Just Cause 4, I was probably like a year and a half I was cast before the release. Fire Emblem was probably about a year. But there have been times like the Star Fox, when I was cast as Fox McCloud. Oh, that was like 3 weeks prior to the thing coming out. Like, it was super fast. So it's almost never that fast. I would say like a year to a year and a half development cycle, because year and a year and a half is probably pretty average from when you record something.
Okay. Because I think a lot of people get it in their heads that for some reason you get cast and then you maybe have a week before like the first episode of something comes out. And I don't really know how that conception came about. It just did.
I think, there's something they do. I think it's called simul dubbing. It's one studio in Texas does it. So there are animes that will release in Japanese and English like weekly and at the same time. So sometimes that happens. And when you get into a long-running animation show, like on Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or stuff like that, a lot of times you will record every single week on the same day. Like, okay, Thursday is Elena of Avalor Day or whatever. Yeah. And that's what people do.
Okay. So moving on, you managed to book Claude Von Regan. Firstly, you did a fantastic job. Secondly, I know that in drama and theater, we can typically act better if we somewhat relate to the character we play. So would you say that proves true for you and Claude, or are you more opposites? Definitely.
I would say most of my best work has come from characters that have shared personality traits with me, and Claude is no exception. He's just like this snarky whatever guy. Did I lose you here? The screen froze.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, Claude and me are very similar in that, like, we have a lot of attitude. We have a lot of stuff rolls off our back. We don't take a lot of things too seriously. And yeah, that's definitely a tenet of my personality.
Okay. Well, I'm not entirely sure the golden tier route, guilty as charged. It seems like a lot of Claude's struggle is with himself and his heritage and kind of navigating through that, as opposed to the other Lords in the series who are just concerned with either buying their kingdoms, taking over the world, etc. How do you think this affects him and his personality within Folkland?
So you broke up quite a bit during that, but I think...
Sorry.
It's okay. I think I got the gist of it. Versus Claude's struggles being internal with his heritage, and the others being sort of external things that had happened to them. Yeah. So what was the question at the very end?
How would you think this kind of affects him and makes him different from the other lords? Because most of his struggle is with himself, like you said. It's not really as external as the others.
Yeah, I think, and now I can't make any judgments on the Edelgard and Dimitri routes, because although I voiced Claude's opposition to them, I didn't, I'm not totally privy to what happened, so I'm making assumptions.
And to be fair, he wasn't too involved in them. Like, right. He was there and then he was gone.
Yeah. So I would say that the way that I know Claude deals with the people around him, he certainly doesn't treat anybody as a means to an end. He treats them as part of the end, because he's struggling with a lot of internal stuff of who he is and what it means to be who he is and where he came from. And in order to like gauge that, he's got to view that through the lens of a lot of different people. So as opposed to like thinking of his classmates as tools he can use in a conflict or in a war to achieve some grandiose aim like Edelgard's or Dimitri's, it's more of like, well, how can I engage with these people and experience life together and then learn what it means to be who I am?
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that has made this game so unique, is that each route and each lord, every single character has so much depth to them that you really can't compare them to anybody else within the game itself.
Right.
So I think they managed to do a really good job kind of fleshing out the characters, if that makes sense.
Cool.
Well, I saw in another interview that you have played Fire Emblem Awakening in the past, so you aren't exactly a stranger to the series. With that said, since you're now kind of a bit more involved with the community, being a voice actor in it and all, what do you think of it so far?
I enjoy it. I mean, I've enjoyed strategy or tactics RPG games my whole life. Final Fantasy Tactics and Ogre Tactics are both great games, so I'm familiar with the concept. I've always played games, so this I really enjoy. Comparing it to Awakenings, I really liked, and I commented on this in my stream. I really like the format change, where it's not like a visual novel combat. This is like, you really feel like you get that JRPG classic Final Fantasy element in there. Yeah. And then you go into the strategy battle. And then it's like, it still feels very Fire Emblem, but it does so in a way that enhances the story.
Okay, good. Because I was going to ask next, since you had played a previous title, were you kind of thinking about how the community would receive Three Houses up to its release, considering how different it was? Or was it something you even thought about?
I wouldn't say I thought about it, how different it was. I knew it was going to be a new take on the way. Just because I had played Awakening, I understood that, like, okay, now that you can walk around a castle, it's different. These elements are different. The things you can pick up and the things you can do, the mini games and stuff like that, it's all very different. And I knew it was going to be its first console release, which is huge. But I don't know that I was ever like, I wonder if it's going to be well received or not.
Okay. So, being a main character, you obviously became privy to a lot of info, at least regarding the Golden Deer route. And now you're playing through it yourself. I've noticed that Three Houses in particular, past Fire Emblem games, they've all had their own messages within the stories, but it was more, let's fight the dragon, or let's fight the bad guy on the other continent. Three Houses, it isn't a lot of infighting, but with it, it carries a lot of messages, it seems. And I was wondering, as you were kind of going through voicing these lines, was there ever a moment when you were like, this is real? Like, this is too real, in a way? Because it seems there are a lot of moments where the characters almost seem human.
Well, that's the goal, right? In any story.
Right.
That's what stories and storytelling do for us, is we learn what it is to be like somebody who isn't us. It's one of the only ways that we can do it. That's why we consume stories, and that's why we tell each other stories, is to learn something about ourselves and other people. So I wouldn't ever say, when you said too real, sometimes it feels too real if a story gets preachy, or there's just like they're hammering this theme home, like, religion is bad. But Fire Emblem doesn't do that. It presents all the people that make up a perspective, or every person in the story has their own perspective, No one, in a good story, nobody thinks they're the villain. So it's, they're all just real. They feel like real people experiencing supernatural problems, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Well, alrighty then. Once again, I'm really, really thankful for this opportunity. But
happy to provide.
Yeah, I've got one last question before we wrap this up. On your website, it says you would really love to play some bigger roles like Link or a role in Shin Megami Tensei. With that said, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Do you think you'll still be voice acting, or will you be just seeing where the world leads you?
So a lot of people don't pick up on that. That line on my website is a joke.
Oh, really?
All the characters I list have no lines.
Yeah, that's true.
So all the main characters in like Shin Megami Tensei, they never say anything. Link never says anything. So that's kind of an in-joke for the nerd community.
I was just thinking about it because I was like, well, you know, in Breath of the Wild, he finally got a bit of a voice. I wonder.
Yeah. But yeah, for the most part, it's just a joke.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
I see myself, I mean, like, voice acting is great, and I'll do it as long as I'm able to do it. I'm not really sure. I talk about this a lot with my wife, actually, because I've changed careers so often. It feels very strange to think about myself 10 years from now. Like, am I still just going to be a voice actor? Or am I going to do what a lot of voice actors do, is branch out and like, okay, I'm going to start directing because I have a broader perspective of storytelling. I'm going to show run. I'm going to produce something. I don't know. I'm all open to it. Right now, I really like where I am. I always tell directors and producers, I was like, man, I love my side of the glass because I see all the stuff that goes on the other side of the glass. I'm like, man, I don't want to deal with any of that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm pretty happy where I am right now. And I think it'll be that way for at least another 5 years.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are happy to hear that. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful. Anything else you want to say before you go?
No, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, everybody, watch out for the series coming up this next week, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.